Okay. Um, Hello, everyone. I cannot see you, um, but I greet you from the depths of my heart. My name is Bayo Akomolafe, um, and I'm speaking to you from India. Just as a way to get something started, you see, Mina and I come from this very call, and can I see my sister Mina? Can she just pop in on the screen so I could just get some spiritual connection there? There you go. There you go.
I felt it too.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So Mina and I come from this world that is very call and responsey, right? It's very participatory, very interactive. So I'm gonna do something with y'all now that is deeply Yoruba. It's from Yoruba storytelling traditions. And it's simple, but it's an initiation into this context that we're creating together. And I want to thank my sisters, Mina and Amisha, for their beautiful talks. I couldn't hear quite well, but I'm sure what they said was wise because they're my wise sisters. So it goes like this. I'm gonna say hello, and then you say hello. Okay? You scream it out. You make sure the cops or the policemen or the police officers find where you are, right? We're disturbing the surveillance paradigm. We're disturbing the paradigm of politeness. Okay, so I'm gonna say hello, and you scream out loud, break through all your polite Britishness, and say it with me, okay? Hello, now say hello, go. Hello. Excellent. Now do it 3 times, and the ritual is complete, okay? Hello. Hello. And one more time, one more time. Let's make it good, good, good. Let's make it one more time. Hello. Now stretch it out. Hello. Excellent. Now you're all tribal. You're initiated, and I thank you for this invitation to speak and share. Mine will be brief. I know that the concept of the soul has been quite particular and central to the framing of this event. And I thought I'll share a bit about the soul and see where that takes me. So I grew up in Nigeria as well. And I grew up in a very Christian and Christocentric world. I don't know if that's true for me now. I didn't hear the other part of the story, but I grew up in a house of, you did, okay. I grew up in a house of prayer and Bible readings and fellowships and casting out demons, that kind of thing, just normal stuff. Um, and so I learned to think of the soul as the ghost within, right? I would go to church and the pastor in, you know, garlanded and robed in beautiful clothes, some kind of showmanship going on, would preach about saving the soul. What does it profit a man to own the whole world and lose his soul? So I tended to think of the soul, like people around me, as some essential quality within, the ghost within the machine, right? And this carried me all the way till I became an undergrad and became a postgrad and became a scientist. And I started to rethink my notion of the soul as the ghost within. I was fascinated with Galileo. I was fascinated with Alexander Pope. I was fascinated with accounts of the universe, that told the story of planets in their circuits, and molecules and atoms and Newtonian imaginations and apples dropping on the head. Deterministic stories, basically, that spoke about a world that was pre-programmed by an agentially wise and divine tinkerer, right? Someone who dipped in and out and made everything work like clockwork. Um, and so I started to think about the soul as without, right? This is a 180-degree switch. No longer within, but now without. The soul is without. The soul is in the chemist's lab. The soul is the alchemical formulations of Jungian therapies. The soul is what we can concoct, right, in stable, controlled environments. The soul is the essence of predictability, control, intelligibility. The soul is patriarchal. The soul is the city, modern civilization, rationalism, the age of reason. Now, all of that crap I've just said has just broken down, right? Because I, the world kicks back, to use the phrase of one of my mentors, Karen Barad, an iconic feminist and a friend of mine, professor at UCSC, and uh, someone that I dedicated most of my work in my first book, These Wilds Beyond Our Fences, to. The world strikes back. And there's a time when, we continue on our path thinking that we are the center of the world. Let me put it this way, that the story of the soul within and the story of the soul without are actually the same story. It might seem desperately different, but they're actually the same story, because what they do is they centralize the human. The first story is the story of our agency. It's the story of our centrality. And it does that by reducing everything that is intelligible and beautiful and wise about the universe to Jonathan, to Mina, to Amisha, reduces it to the person, right? The second story still does the same thing, because it posits that only us can understand and appreciate the beauty of the universe. It does not deal and traffic in, stories of ghosts and, and hauntings, but it does tell the story of anthropocentricity, of our human centrality. And I was looking for a different story. Well, I wasn't quite looking for a different story. I was quite satisfied with where I was. It was doing me well in my academic career. But then the world kicks back. And I wish I can tell you the whole story of how the world disturbs the centrality of the human. We're witnessing that today with the pandemic, right? The infinitesimally small virus upended entire economies, disturbed the idea of progress. Now, I don't know how to book a ticket. Not that I don't know how to book a ticket, but I don't know if I should, because I'm not sure if I would lose that ticket, because we're now in a time of deep and radical indeterminacy and uncertainty. There's no saying what tomorrow might bring. This is the world disturbing our centrality. This is the insurgency of the invisible. And so I now say that the soul is not within or without, it's between, right? It's between. And this between, it reminds me of the Zhang Kao mythologies of the native Australians and the art that they produce called Bildung. Bildung is a form of art, a form of art making that involves cross-hatching lines, basically, to produce a shimmering effect on a painting. Basically, it's a monstrous, it's a chimeric artwork. It is the kind of work that disturbs and blurs the boundaries between things. It's the vocation of becoming lost. It's the more than human art that invites us to notice that we're not as coherent or as intelligible as we think, right? We are composite beings. We are produced by gut microbiomes. We are produced by furniture. Right now, if you're feeling happy, it might have something to do not with your inner state, your gilded interiority, I like to say. It might have a lot to do with the fact that the furniture is pleasant, or that you had a good breakfast this morning and your bacteria are singing. You're like, yes, and sending signals to your brain to be happy, right? So we are not as contained or as well put together as we think. We are always and have always been post-human, right? And this is what between means. This is where Bildung means, which literally means a flash of light, a burst of light that disturbs, the container and makes things spill open into ecological dimensions. Hence the practices of material feminisms, hence the practices of eco-psychologies that try to tether or anchor us to the world around us. We are no longer as pristine as we were, as Jonathan thought he was. Jonathan is a mess. We all are, right? That is the invitation of today, that we're messy contraptions, we're algorithmic, we're diasporic, we're nomadic becomings, no longer beings contained. Now, it's very important to say this because I think it's good to think with betweening as a concept, with Bildung as a concept, right? Especially in these times when it seems our efforts to create change is only leading to a form of stuckness. And I speak as a Black man who, in pre-pandemic times, if we can speak in those ways, was almost always pulled aside for secondary screening, right? I know what it means to be pulled aside. Like, sir, could you step this way, please? Just, it was always me. Just random just seemed to be out to get me. Random just seemed to be out for people that looked like me. Um, and so, I want to hold that tension, that appreciation with with an acknowledgement that we have been fighting for racial justice for a long time. We have been fighting for therapeutic instigated health for a long time. The Jungian-based therapist James Hillman would say we've been doing psychotherapy for 100 years and the world isn't better, right? We've been doing all these things for many years and we don't seem to be getting anywhere new. Why is that? Why is it that climate justice just seems impossible at this point, in spite of Greta, in spite of Obama, in spite of the Paris Agreement, in spite of all the photoshopped moments that we have, and in spite of the hard work that we've put together to create a planetary scale response to the crisis we're facing? Why is it that since the 1970s we've known about this shit and we're not getting any closer to addressing it? We've been saying since the 1970s, the first Earth Day, we've been saying we need to get our act together yesterday. And we're still saying the same thing today. We're stuck, folks. We're stuck. This is, like my friend would say, a situation, right? Spell it out for y'all. Shit and situation. As you might notice, I'm not being polite. And I'm not being delicate, right? I'm leaning into the fugitive indelicacy of the moment and speaking with power from a different place. I posit that we're stuck because of this myth and narrative of liberal humanism. And liberal humanism is the story of human centrality. It's basically the thing that says, the reason why we exist in this world is because we are masters of the realm. And if you want to see change happen, then it's left to you and you and you. Look under your seat. There's something in there for you. I'm doing Oprah at this point. But basically, that's liberal humanism. It's the story that it's left to us, that the weight of the universe is on our shoulders. It's left to us to create change. And I disagree with that because it's the occlusion of the more than human world that has always been the condition of our abundance. That is what we now have to reckon with today, that we are not the only ones in the room, that the age of reason is now defunct. And we're now met with an age where we have to meet the more than human, animal, inhuman, non-human, spiritual, intergenerational, ancestral, microbial beings and becomings that have always been part of how we came to matter or how we come to matter and how we are yet to matter, right? I like to tell the story of the Crafts. The Crafts are a couple in 1848, born in Macon, Georgia, Ellen and William Craft, born into slavery, into the plantation. And one day they decided that their love could not be contained by the plantation. And so they decided to escape, commit an act of marronage, as the literature would say. And how did they escape? They disguised themselves. So Ellen Craft is fair-skinned, right? And so she could pass for a white boy if she tried hard enough. And she did. She disguised herself tucked in her hair, Mulan style, for those of you who are parents and know Disney, um, and disguised herself as this young man who was about to travel up north with her slave, who is her husband. And it worked. It worked. One of the many moments where recognition or putting ourselves, before the state, seeking recognition, seeking power is a curse. And one of the moments where we notice that we have the gift of not being recognized, the gift of being mistaken. But I digress. I tell that story and I invite you to read up on the crafts as a way of noticing that we're way in over our heads. We're dealing with something more than just systems. We're dealing with something much more than just capitalism or patriarchy or any of the villains on the rogue list of villains that we have, any of the boogeymen. We're dealing with force fields. We're dealing with paradigms. We're dealing with liminal flows that will often enlist our best efforts to defeat them as part of its arsenal, which is the reason why I say in framing what I call post-activism, that it is often the case that the way we respond to the crisis is part of the crisis, right? The way we try to defeat the enemy becomes part of the reinscription and the reinforcement of our incarceration. That we need an entirely different epistemology, an entirely different cosmo-perception to deal with climate change or to meet the beings that are calling us out into the village square. No matter the kinds of technologies we might throw at it, something else is desired at this point. And this is what I would frame as making sanctuary. Making sanctuary for me is something so fugitive that it escapes full description, right? I don't know how to describe it in such a way that will be palatable or completely intelligible to everyone listening to it. But I will try by saying that for me, making sanctuary is the modest material semiotic practices of becoming more and more responsible to times of crisis. It's a way of meeting failure, not as something to deal with or transcend, but as an ally, as a friend, as a gift. Let me tell you a story, and this will wrap things up, of how I came to think of sanctuary in this way, and how I think that this is the kind of weird politics that is available to us. And by us, I mean those of us here that might feel politically homeless, those of us here that are like my sister, Amisha, learning or unlearning trust in democratic systems. Those of us who feel, nah, I mean, we've had it all. We've had the Obama, yes, we can. Did I do it well? Did I do it well? Was that a good impression? Okay. You know, those of us who are having those, moments when we think it's just the next Messiah, it's just the next system. If only we can have this guy or this lady or this party in power, then everything will be fine and dandy. It's what we continue to say, and Mina would know this in Nigeria. It's the continuous failure, the continuous failure of imagination. If only I could escape to London, everything would be fine. If only I could escape to the West, if only we can look more like New York, everything will be fine. But now we're learning that not so, that there's something else that is needed. Something else outside of the highway is needed because the highway no longer leads to interesting places. So this is the story I tell about sanctuary, that in medieval times, um, specifically from the 4th century to the 16th century, thereabout, a 1,000-year practice was afoot. And this practice was the practice of claiming sanctuary. It was a practice that the church adopted to grant asylum to those people who are fugitives, who are accused, right? And so you might see glimpses of claiming sanctuary in the stories and accounts of the Salem witch trials, for instance, and other stories that have to do with people who are accused of something terrible, but were given some kind of space, some respite, some rest to exile their bodies from their claims or from the anger and rage of their accusers. We don't have sanctuaries today, per se, even though I heard some time ago that some church in Belgium um, granted sanctuary, this ancient medieval practice, to refugees across the ocean. Um, it's not a popular practice today. We now have something we call lawyers, right? And that's not exactly enchanted. but this claim of this practice of claiming sanctuary is what I queer and make strange as this practice of making sanctuary. And in it, we might find something of a cartographical project, not a formula, but a cartographical project that is modest, that is non-formulaic, that might tell us a story of how transformation tends to happen. It starts with accusation, or what I'll call accusation. Accusation is not literally someone saying, I accuse you. It's not only that. I accuse you of being a witch, and then damned if you do and damned if you don't, if you know the story. It's the disruption that comes with topographical shifts. It's a pandemic. It's climate change. It's when the flatness of modernity is upended by rupture, right? Something bursts through the flatness of things and disarticulates our bodies. So disarticulation is the next step. And I don't like to speak in terms of steps, but for the sake of our conversation, I'll just name it that. And because I'm also hungry, so I can't think of another word. So disarticulation comes afterwards. Accusation, disarticulation. Our bodies are rendered disarticulate. Um, we no longer know how to walk forward. So this is what some of us might be feeling at the moment. It's the indeterminacy of planning a trip. It's not knowing which party to go for. Things are very awkward at this moment. So this is what I call disarticulation. This leads to fugitivity often, right? Fugitivity is refusing to work within the labor of the plantation. It's saying maybe there's a different way. Maybe there's another way to frame this. Maybe there's something different that I can give myself to. So until fugitivity and loss gives birth to claiming sanctuary. So in those days, fugitives will attach themselves, you know, to a part of the church and scream, "I claim sanctuary," right? So if you've watched the Hunchback of Notre Dame, you know what I'm speaking about. And I keep on dropping all these Disney-esque features because I'm a father, and that's what we do. Okay. um, I'm a father of a 7-year-old child and a 4-year-old boy, and that's all I watch these days. And so claiming sanctuary leads to something different, which I would call meeting the monster. Meeting the monster. It might intrigue you to know this, that on most of those sanctuaries in medieval times, for 1,000 years, their doors had something called a haggle day or a door knocker, right? You held the door knocker, which was this chimeric being that had this tongue or something. It was always this monstrous being. And I always wondered, why would you invite people in with the face of the monster, right? What is it about the monster that speaks hospitality, right? Our Western epistemologies may not be able to account for that. But I think there's something deep about the monster and its attachment and entanglement with hospitality. Because the hospitality of the monster is to unmake you, is to disturb your categoricity, is to say that you are not as decidable as you think you are, that you're spread out. And it's only the monster that can help dismantle the citizen, dismantle the atomic quality of the citizen that is gestating in the city. That is what monsters do well. And so there's something about sanctuary making in these times that call for us to conduct inquiry in a way that allows us to spill, allows us to move away from the anthropocentric project that has given birth to the Anthropocene, that has given birth and is instigating racial injustice, and that is actually asking us to go beyond justice, beyond recognition by the state, beyond protest politics, to do something underground that can only be framed by what I call making sanctuary. And then what happens after we present ourselves to the monster? We exile our bodies, right? There's something that always happened, or most of the time happened with those sanctuary projects. You didn't return to the city after you were accused, you were exiled. So I feel that this is a time for exile. Now, this is not a pure arrival. This is not a search for purity. This is not a search for intact politics. This is not a search for woke politics raised to the nth degree of infinity. This is none of that. This is an invitation to touch our complicity, to notice that even those of us that are the good guys, right, like Mina, me, and Amisha, are certainly the best of the lot of you here. We're good people, right? Even those of us that are the good people are already entangled with systems of suffering in ways that are pre-intentional, in ways that escape language. Those of you using phone sets right now may not realize that your handsets are connected to conflict mineral resources in the Gambia or in Ghana, or that the luxuries that you enjoy in Europe are connected with the sufferings and playgrounds of toxic waste in Africa or in Asia, right? So this is the minoritarian politics of our time. We're not asking to be recognized any longer. I don't want a seat at modern tables. I want other places of power. I don't want to be let into the room. I don't want a seat at G7 or G8 or G9. I need fugitive places of radical hospitality because there are other places of power that are possible. So this is the invitation of our times, to get lost. My people in Nigeria, the Yoruba elders that I sit with, say, in order to find your way, you must become lost. Bildung, making sanctuary, the brilliance and the shimmering porosity of these moments are invitation to lose our way. And until we lose our way, we may not ever find other ways of being at peace with each other and the world. There you go. That's it.